Greetings, conductors and companions. Welcome to the Jardin du Cirque, the circus garden. This is Breaking Ground, a behind-the-scenes series where I give you a peek behind the curtain at what it's like to begin a lore-driven crochet endeavor. There are 5 stages, and we're currently on our second of the 5. So the stages are seed, root, sprout, bloom, and garden. With each stage, there are 3 to 5 goals that need to be accomplished before I graduate to the next stage. So our remaining goals for the root era are open an Etsy shop, apply for a first market, prep for the market, and get my Flora the planter bees prepared for a founding sale. For our time today, we are going to look at the Pollen Basket, which is everything I did this week. And then Ringleader's Rounds, which is a process journal where I show you some of the design processes and how I'm thinking about things, and just behind the scenes footage of me working on stuff. Then we're going to end with the Groundskeeper's Chronicle, which is looking at our goals and navigating how we're going to get closer to accomplishing them in this upcoming week. The Pollen Basket. So I was quite a busy bee this week, so I attended Knit ATX's social. Knit ATX is one of the small yarn shops here in Austin. They carry a lot of like hand-dyed fibers and specialty yarns and stuff of that nature, but they had a really wide selection. I saw some really beautiful cottons for like $10. But yeah, I wanted to check out the space, find a place where I could do some work in a co-working kind of environment. And despite the name, there was quite a few people crocheting. It wasn't just me, so that was really neat. But yeah, overall it was super welcoming, very chill, and just a really gorgeous space. Let's see. I talked to a couple local businesses about their markets, so I went to Lazy Days and got a delicious latte. You should absolutely check them out if you're ever down here. I chatted with the folks there for a little bit, so I am hoping / planning to be at their May market, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I attended the Women of Type meetup, and so this was my first like real networking event. Most of the women who were there for a design conference here. I'm not a graphic designer, but I made a couple connections that I think will be really fruitful, and just had a really nice time with everybody. I think it was probably the best introduction to networking one could hope for. It's all women who are artists, who care about art, and really wanting to share that joy with other people. See, I set up my market tent for the first time, and then I immediately began researching ways to stay cool at markets. It was ridiculously humid. It took me about 30 minutes on my own, and I was drenched in sweat at the end, which just will not do for a market. So with that, I kind of had the idea of making like little fans for people at markets. Just because it is so hot here, it's such a cute way to connect with people, and it gives people a chance to kind of interact with my business without having to be a crochet artist. And I think it's just a public service, quite frankly. What else did I do? I prepped my charms for stitch marker sets. I got my little bubble mailers in, which are super cute. I'll show you those in a second. I reorganized all of my stuff so it's a lot easier for me to pack a kit. And then I worked on Flora's design. So that's going to take us into the Ringleader's Rounds. So with Ringleader's Rounds. So this is Flora. Isn't she so cute? She's so squishy. Look at her tulip eyes. Isn't that so neat? I love that little detail. So the struggle with Flora is figuring out the right wing shape for her. I decided a couple days ago I really wanted to do like wisteria inspired wings. Great idea, really difficult to execute. I think I've made like 8 or 9 iterations of it. So I did some research and I found these super cute butterfly wings by the Projectarian. I really like how they did the backing on the wings. I think that's a really clever way to just help keep everything really neat and even without having to do a ton of extra work. So I'm working through that, and hopefully I can figure that out today or tomorrow so that way I can start taking photos of Flora and just getting ready for the Founders Sale. So the other thing I was doing this week was stitch marker sets. So I got my bubble mailers, I got a bunch of little charms. So one of my goals is to use as much of my existing craft supplies as possible. So I've been practicing with this 22 gauge wire that I have since it already fits through the beads. However, 22 gauge wire is very thin and very delicate, so it can only be handled to a certain point before it just breaks. So I'm figuring out where that edge is and really just getting better at twisting the wire. The other thing that I've been up to is navigating, adding some kind of stoppers to the stitch markers because the charms keep slipping off, which I don't enjoy. And so I got earring backs originally, but they look quite bulky in comparison to the wire, even though they're only 4mm. So I don't know if I need to get crimping beads, but my worry with crimping beads is that they're gonna stay exactly where I put them, whereas the earring backs can be moved to give you as much wiggle or as little as you would prefer. So it's really more of like an aesthetics versus design function kind of situation. And we might just have to see as we go. The other Groundskeeper's Chronicle. So the goals for this era are mostly in chronological order, meaning that opening an Etsy shop is the priority of this week, as that's probably one of my bigger hurdles, just because opening an Etsy shop requires a lot of little steps. So I have to pay a shop fee, validate my identity, get the right sales taxes applied, write my policies, figure out shipping, like all of those little things. So as kind of a downshoot of opening the Etsy shop, I need to get my stitch marker sets arranged. So I need to finish stamping the backs of the cards, signing the backs of the cards, getting the charms actually put into some kind of set. And then I need to take photos of those sets. So that is primarily what I will be up to this week. Alright, conductors, let's take a second to do the fun YouTube stuff of liking and subscribing and hitting the bell. Let's see, I will be posting a reel, or I guess they're called shorts here, once my Etsy shop is up, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And until then, have a wonderful week, and remember that magic is always at the tip of your fingers. Alright, be safe everyone. Bye.